Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano, and we got a great guest for you today. Los Angeles Angels third baseman Anthony Rendon joins us on the podcast today. Before we get to our conversation with the newly signed third baseman of the Angels, I want to tell you about our partnership and our sponsorship with International Justice Mission. We love having them be new partners with us here at Sports Spectrum on the podcast. And what they do is just awesome. They have a desire to see slavery ended for good in our lifetime. And what they do is they partner with local authorities to rescue victims of violence and bringing criminals to justice, restoring survivors, and strengthening justice systems, helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. For more information about how you can learn to become a partner with IJM and fight for those who can't fight for themselves, go to ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and become a Freedom Partner with IJM today. Really excited today on the podcast to welcome Anthony Rendon, Los Angeles Angels third baseman. And it sounds even weird to say that because for many years, Anthony played with the Washington Nationals. In fact, he was selected by the Nationals in the 6th overall selection 2011 MLB Draft. A couple years later, he makes his Major League Baseball debut with the Nationals, April 21st, 2019. He played 7 seasons with Washington, and just this past season in 2019, he stepped it up big time. 2019 MLB All-Star, 2019 All-MLB First Team, 2019 World Series Champion. He was also a Silver Slugger Award in 2019, and he led Major League Baseball in RBI with 126. And then he was a free agent. In December 2019 comes and changes his life forever. He signs a 7-year deal for $245 million to play third base for the Los Angeles Angels. And now Rendon will be in a lineup with a future Hall of Famer in Albert Pujols and a future Hall of Famer in Mike Trout. It's going to be a fun lineup to watch in 2020, and Anthony Rendon is going to be a big part of that Angels offense. Anthony Rendon is also a big believer in Jesus, and he doesn't do a ton of interviews about his faith. I mean, if you go Google Anthony Rendon and faith, you'll find a couple things, but you won't find a lot because he doesn't do a lot of interviews. But we were fortunate and grateful and thankful to have Anthony Rendon join us here on Sports Spectrum to talk about faith and to talk about baseball. Take a listen to our conversation with Anthony Rendon here on Sports Spectrum. Los Angeles Angels third baseman. Anthony, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Hey, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Does it feel weird to hear you being called Los Angeles Angels third baseman? Have you gotten used to that yet?
No, because the only time I really hear it I heard it was when I got introduced when we were over there in Anaheim, and nothing's really been going on since the off season. So I guess I got to start getting used to it once we start heading into spring training.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing when you think about you've been a part of a team for so many years, and now you have a brand new team and a brand new place to live and a brand new place to kind of get used to and calling home. I know your faith is certainly important to you, and we're going to talk about your testimony in a moment. But tell us about how that faith played a role in the decision to make that decision to sign with the Angels.
Yeah, I think leading up to it, even from last year, during the season, my wife and I were just trying to think, it's, going into the winter, it's going to be hectic, and just knowing about what's been going on in years past with free agents. And we didn't want it to actually, become a burden on our lives. We wanted it to be, kind of like a moment that we wanted to look forward to. We didn't want it to consume us, but we wanted to, try to stay in the Word as much as possible, try to just trust in in his plan and not try to just think that, well, we want to go here, we want to go there because, we like the weather here, we like the weather there, we like, they have great fans, they have great food here. And so we didn't want really our plans kind of take over and, try to ignore maybe, his will for our lives and where he wanted us to be. And so we were trying to just not, be so selfish and trying to think about that. And we reached out to, many people that, we believe that have just huge impacts on our lives, just, spiritually. And we do try to lean on those accountability partners. And every single one of them really just said that, trust in his will and then, and just have faith that, he'll put you in the right spot. And I was just thinking, I'm like, man, just don't send me overseas on a mission trip, I'm in China or I'm in this, secluded world. And, I don't mind, being on the beach of Mexico somewhere, white sand beaches.
Yeah.
So, but it was definitely an exciting process. And so we're happy with the decision that we had made.
When you think back about a year ago and all that has transpired really since a year ago, we're taping this in the winter of early 2020 as we get ready for spring training, and all that took place since, say, the start of baseball season 2019, when you have your best season on the field, you make the All-Star team, you win a World Series, and then certainly the big contract to go to the Angels. When you think back, what thoughts or emotions come to mind? Or did you I want to say, did you expect this, but did you see, some of this coming at all? It was pretty crazy year and an awesome year at that.
Yeah, I definitely didn't see any of this coming for sure. Definitely obviously I'm a competitor and being an athlete, so I'm confident in, my abilities and, I trust in the process that I've put in, and all the hard work or whatnot. But to this scale, to that magnitude, to actually, being an all-star or whatever, having a great year, we just won the World Series. And even from the 19-31 start that we had, the roller coaster ride where it was not, the best clubhouse to be in. It was just, the environment was, pretty negative at that time. So, you just never know where life's going to take you. And I just think you have to kind of just roll with the punches and, and take those speed bumps as they come and, just keep on trucking. At least that's how I look at it. And I think that's how we should view life and, in general as, as followers of Christ.
How much did your faith play a role early in the season, I guess, just going back on the field? When you say 19-31 and you really look at where the Nationals came from to win a World Series, it was quite the run. And even the run that you guys made through the playoffs was incredible to watch. But how much is your faith playing a role in trying to keep yourself, grounded and all right, I know I'm playing pretty well personally or whatever, but our team's not doing well. You mentioned the clubhouse. What does that look like, trying to kind of keep that even keel and stay focused on the positive and stay connected to the Lord when you're going through, a difficult period on the field like that?
Yeah, and I just think that you have to just realize that there is a greater plan in the end. And on the baseball aspect of it, I think we realized that, we weren't going to win the division. We weren't going to, win the pennant. We weren't going to win the World Series in the, first 2 months of the season.
Yeah.
And so we realized that we had, just a long season ahead of us. And I think that's kind of like how we should treat it, I guess in life, or that's how we should translate from our faith into life, just because we're not living for, for this world, we're living for eternity. And so we always think that, the situation that we're here in at the moment is like the worst situation that we can ever be in, because it's just magnified so much, whether it be because of our environment or whether it be because, the situation that we're in is just, really bad at the moment for us personally. But, our Lord, he sees, the greater picture down the road. He might just send us up for, a 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. And we don't know that. And I think having that faith of that unknown is, just trust that, he's just going to guide us, and he has our hand along the way, and he's just leading us down the right path. And he wouldn't put us through anything that, he didn't think that we couldn't handle.
Before I take that shift into the faith world, I want to hear your testimony in a second. I got to ask you just about winning a World Series, which is what every player plays for on the field. I mean, it's just incredible. And the way you guys won it, you didn't even win a home game the whole series, and yet you win the World Series. It's incredible. Can you describe what that was like to go through that and then be able to, have that trophy in your hand and say, yeah, we're World Series champions, and celebrate in Washington, D.C. with your teammates?
Yeah, it was definitely emotional. I mean, I try to, like you said, I try to stay even keel the whole time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you can't help but your nerves and your emotions just, start bottling up inside because of the, the magnitude of the situation. Like you said, this is what every team should play for. This is what every player would want to be in this situation to be in a, in the World Series and to actually win. And then I think for my wife and I, it's just for us actually to come back home and win it in our hometown where we both grew up, where we have so many families and we have so much friends here. And we got to share that moment, with a lot of those people. I think once I had that trophy in my hand, I was like, I was just trying to like push it off as long as possible. And, this is awesome. But then, when you see that trophy, you're on the stage, you're like, I want to just hold it. I want to grab it. And it was definitely like a relief feeling because it's like my personal, like my worst nightmare where, you play all the way to the last possible day of the season, Game 7 of the World Series, and then like you lose.
Yeah.
And so it's like we came all this way just to come up short, just by that much. And I don't know how, some of the other teams I've done in the past where, they've had that moment. And so it's just like, man, like it almost would have been like, I'd have been all right if we would have just like lost in like the first round or whatever. And we would have had this whole month to be hanging out with my family, be hanging out with my daughter because, we still basically came up short. We weren't winners if we would have lost in Game 7.
Right. So you're saying, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but the idea of thinking about losing a Game 7, it just would have been better if you don't even make the playoffs in some cases because it's the same outcome. You don't walk away with the title.
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, whoa, like I could have been making memories. I mean, not that I didn't make memories with my family and my daughter and my wife and I during the playoff process because we did, but,
sure.
We could have been at home in an environment where, we're just the most comfortable because we're both just, Texas, blood through and through. And it's like, man, we could have just been at home laying on the couch and then we wouldn't have to go through all those gray hairs, all the stresses of the playoffs and all the elimination games and, on our toes and all that, this crazy whirlwind of emotions.
We'll get back to our conversation with Anthony Rendon in just a moment. But friends, I want to take a moment to share with you a bit about an organization that I care a lot about, IJM, International Justice Mission. What many don't know is that violence is a threat to people around the world who are poor. It's as much a part of daily life as hunger, disease, or homelessness, but it's often overlooked. Guess what? It's not overlooked by IJM. They believe, actually, we believe, that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. And by partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors, and strengthen justice systems, IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. But they can't do this without your help, and that's where you come in. It's why I want you to consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner. These Freedom Partners are some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice, and their support of $24 or more each month helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they are rescued until they are fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but it's life-changing, and I'd encourage you to join me in being a Freedom Partner with IJM today. Here's how you can get involved. Go to ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner. It really does make a huge difference in the world. Let's get back to our conversation with Anthony Rendon of the Los Angeles Angels here on Sports Spectrum. Let's shift this conversation and intersect it with faith. We've already talked a lot about faith, obviously, but where does that journey with the Lord begin for you? Where does Christ become a part of your life and become your Lord, your Savior?
Man, I think it definitely started, ever since I was younger. My parents would always take my brother and I to church. We grew up Catholic. And then it just kind of took a switch. I believe I was about 8 years old, where my parents actually were speaking with one of my teammates' parents, saying, I guess they're real strong followers of Christ, and they're like, hey, you should, come join our church, and this. It's not too far from our house. Next thing you know, we had switched churches, and we went to just a non-denominational Bible-based church.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know this, but as of like a few years ago, I finally, or maybe it was like about 5 years ago, I found out that my parents had gave their life to Christ back then.
Wow.
But they didn't express that to us when, I was probably about 8 years old and my brother was about 12. And so you guys think I'm quiet and I'm reserved and I stay to myself. My parents are like times 100 of what I am. And so I think once we had switched churches and I wasn't falling asleep in pews at that early age, and we were kind of getting into the Bible-based church where it was more relatable. It wasn't necessarily me just thinking, oh crap, I gotta do right because, I'm just trying not to go to hell.
Right.
I'm just trying to I gotta do the right thing. I gotta follow these sets of rules. And, if I do this, then, I'll be good. But if I go this route, then, God's going to smite me with like his like lightning bolt arrow. And then I'm just going to be cursed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, it's crazy, but that's how I viewed it as. And then, as it gets closer to high school, hanging out with some teammates of mine that, his father and then would pray before meals. And, it kind of got me thinking. And then, going to college, getting plugged in, we had Rice baseball Bible studies ran by former baseball players, and running out of breath here. And then finally, kind of just realizing, just listening there, I'm like learning more and more. I'm not necessarily speaking in these Bible studies, but I'm just listening because my knowledge, I never really dug into the word at that time. I was just kind of just thinking I got to just, take a step back and just, try to gain as much information as possible before I kind of just answer a question and completely, off the radar, wrong answer. And I just feel like I'm an idiot, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, 2009, which is my freshman year, I get hurt. And everything all the way up my whole life was just baseball. But then the thing I loved the most was taken away from me. So I'm sitting there at my parents' house and I'm bedridden because I'm in a cast, and I'm like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? I have, all this pain and I can't do anything. I'm basically useless. What am I doing here? And then of course I see my Bible, and then I start digging in, finally start reading, but then season comes back around and I start doing my own thing again, but still going to, those baseball Bible studies where I knew I needed to go there, but I wasn't fully committed. And then that was all the way through college. And then finally, when I got called up with the Nationals in 2014, they had a large group of guys that were just very strong believers. We had Adam LaRoche.
Yeah.
We had Ian Desmond. We had Craig Stammen, and Strauss was in there. Having Moore. And same thing happened. I knew I needed to be there, but I was still unsure. I didn't really dig into the word much, so I didn't want to sound like the guy that just didn't know anything. And I was very prideful at the time. So,
yeah, sure.
Listening to these guys' stories and listening to them open up toward one another and, sharing some things that are real personal to them. And I'm like, man, these guys are going through a lot of stuff. And, they feel so comfortable with, these group of guys, and, they feel comfortable with me, who's just a rookie, or rookie just being here. It's 2013, 2014. And I'm like, well, man, these guys are like, there must be something to this. So I started digging in the word more. And then finally, I think it was the end of 2014, 2015, I kind of started making that transition. I started opening up a little bit more, started digging into the word a little bit more. And, he's kind of just taking me by the wing and just pushed me where I'm trying to stay in the word as much as I can now. And my life has kind of just taken a good turn for the better.
No, that's an awesome story and an awesome testimony. And I love the idea that you kind of took it through the process, because I think for a lot of people, there is a moment for many of us, including myself. I grew up Catholic and didn't really become a believer or follower of Christ until I was 26, 27. But it was a process for me. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like for you, Anthony, it was a process that started obviously with your parents planting seeds when you're younger, but going through through Rice, and then through getting to the Nationals, and even into your maturity as a baseball player, but even more as a believer. This whole thing's a process for you, right?
Yes, definitely. I'm just glad that I kind of didn't jump, 100% all the way in at the beginning, because I probably wouldn't have grasped enough information of what, his true meaning of his love for us really is. I think as athletes, if we grow up playing baseball, or a sport, our whole lives, our worth, our value is based on, our performance basically is, if we hit a home run, or if we score a touchdown, or if we, score 20 points in a basketball game, the coaches are, yeah, hurrah, good job. Or majority of coaches are, giving you praise and you feel good about yourself. But
sure,
if you have a down game, there's a lot of yelling, and, maybe even you have a parent who, gets on you a little bit more if you have a bad game or whatnot. And so, as a child, you think that you have to perform a certain way. You have to be perfect, to gain acceptance by other people. But with Christ, it's a complete opposite. And I'm glad that, I finally grasped that, where, we're all broken, we're all sinners, and he doesn't matter where we came from. He's just going to love us for who we are as a person. And he's just going to try to, he's going to change our ways slowly by changing, our hearts, and then our actions will depict that.
I want to ask you about success. We obviously talked about the success from last year, but certainly you've had a really good career, and it's culminated in the big contract and going to play with the Angels. But how does that success, how do you view success, I guess, from the lens of a believer in Christ? Because that success for a lot of people that I've talked to can be a real detriment in many ways, because you can get caught up in people patting Anthony Rendon on the back and telling you how awesome you are. So how do you kind of handle that success and that praise from others?
Man, it's still definitely awkward, and it's definitely weird for me. I try to deflect it as much as possible. And I think for me, I try to gauge success on, how am I treating my wife lately? How am I treating my daughter lately? How am I just treating my family in general? Am I exemplifying Christ's love to other people as best that I can, or am I being so self-indulging, over the past week, over the last couple of days, whatever, where, I could feel, that my life is, actually walking a couple of steps, away from the Lord or whatever. I think that's how I try to gauge success as. It's not necessarily that, I hit, 20 home runs a year, 25 home runs a year. And obviously that's great and all. If I do that, then that's a competitive nature of me that I want to do good each and every day. But I mean, my performance on the field is not going to be the person who I want to be defined as. And so that's why, especially with, the big contract, and, everyone knows that, pro athletes make a lot of money, but I just try to stay grounded as much as possible. And I try to stick around the right people, where even if I get off track just a little bit, they'll be right there, just like, hey, what are you doing? I need accountability brothers around me to kind of just hold me in line and, keep me going on the straight and narrow.
What about platform? I remember when you won the World Series, and I saw you on Scott Van Pelt's show on ESPN, my former employer, and there you were, and he asked you about how do you stay so even keel, and you're like, hey, it starts with my relationship with the Lord, and I love that. But I wonder for you about how important it is for you to use your platform as a representative of Christ. You talked about deflecting that attention from you to others or to God, and maybe you don't like doing a lot of these type of interviews and kind of quiet or whatever the perception is, but there's still a platform and a responsibility that God has placed you on to point others back to him. How do you view that, and how important is that for you?
Yeah, exactly. I've definitely came around a lot more than what I have been in the past.
Yeah.
I think our chaplain in D.C., Tim Pearson, he was a huge help in that regard. He was always pushing us to, whether it be him and Adam LaRoche came up with the idea, make sandwiches and, while we're in Philly and go feed them out or hand them out to the guys, or the homeless people or whatever. And, at the park, after the game, and, that opens up as a conversation starter. But it's little things like that would just push me out of my comfort zone and, go visit these kids, go do this, go do that. And for the longest time, I would kind of be resentment. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not a big social butterfly, but I think as I continue to grow in my faith and, digging into the word and reading up on, to whom much is given, much is expected. And, we are given this platform and we all are called to, spread his word, to everybody. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm not living out my purpose on what we're supposed to be here for. And I think Ian Desmond actually said a great thing, and I would say a long time ago. He goes,
yeah.
I forgot where he was reading, but he goes, it says that, as you walk, then you share your faith. So it's not necessarily saying that, we have to be summoned, we have to go all the way across the other side of the world to actually share our testimony or to share Jesus. It's like as we walk our daily life, as we're, checking out at the grocery store. My buddy told me this. He goes, his buddy would say that, if he would look for the individual, the cashier checker that had looked like they were just in the worst of mood.
Yeah.
And they would go specifically through that line and just try to be as loving as possible to that person. And that could just change someone's outlook on life and just detrimental, just, exponentially. Because they don't know why, that this random person is being so nice to them. But, it's as we're going to the grocery store, it's, as we're standing in line at Starbucks to get a coffee or whatever it is, it's as we walk in our life, that's how, we need to express Christ's love to others.
That's good stuff there. He is Anthony Rendon. Last couple questions here. Anthony, do you have a favorite Bible verse or verses or a Bible story, something that has helped you on this journey that you always cling to? And obviously the entire word, which we've talked about, is important to read, and I love getting into the word as well. But is there a verse, maybe a life verse or a Bible verse that's kind of been one that you've stuck close to over these years?
Yeah, I think it was definitely what I was going through. Like when I was slowly just very, I guess, immature in my faith, is I still think about it today, is in high school I always clung to, with God, all things are possible, because, so many times, there's events in your life that, it seems impossible. Like, how the heck am I going to get this done? Whether, it'd be a certain situation, how am I going to get all the way across town? How am I going to do this? How am I going to, get to all these meetings or whatever? Yeah. And it's like, well, you can have that reassurance and realizing that when you put your faith in Christ, that you have the guy that can, the higher power that can make anything go right, and he's on your side. And so I think that just kind of just comforts me on a daily basis, or whenever I just think about that verse, it's like, man, like we have the creator of all the stars, all the universe, of this earth. He is on our side. Yeah. We're not going against him. Like, we're going to battle with him. Yeah. So with him, like, anything is possible.
And it's been very possible for you in your journey, Anthony. As we close, this is the question we ask all of our guests here on Sports Spectrum, and I'm really fascinated to see what your answer is. What are you learning from God?
Now you're making me nervous.
No, it's an easy question, but it might not be an easy answer. What are you learning from God right now? What is the Lord teaching you right now in the season of life that you're in? What's God showing you?
Yeah, I think right now it's trying to juggle life right now with the wife, with the 18-month-old daughter. Yeah. Now, well, my wife is actually pregnant. She's about to give birth to our second child any minute now. And so I think, excuse me?
No, I was just congratulating you and saying that's awesome.
Oh, no, thank you. So right now, I just think he's just trying to teach me patience and grace. I mean, to just be able to give as much grace as I can that he has given me with, my 18-month-old daughter that, I tell her, hey, and she knows yes and no now. So I, try to tell her just, hey, no, don't do this, don't do that. And of course she does it.
Of course.
And so that's kind of like how I think that, God, he's trying to teach us, how many times if, we say, oh, don't do this, don't do that. And, but, we give into our flesh and we do it again anyways. And so, he doesn't give us a spanking, or he doesn't give us a hit on the wrist or whatever. He just loves us, unconditionally. And, I just think with that and, having a pregnant wife and just trying to just, be there for her as much as possible. And, just try to have that, sympathy for her and what she's going through, because, I couldn't even imagine having a child and having an 8-pound human being come out of my body. So I think that's what he's teaching me at the moment, is just patience and grace. How am I going to just, just relax, take a deep breath, and just try to figure it out.
That's good stuff there. Anthony Rendon, really appreciate your time, my friend, and I'm excited to watch you this year in California and wish you nothing but the best with the LA Angels, certainly becoming a dad for the second time and all that God is doing in your life. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being on the show.
No, Jason, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And that was Anthony Rendon, Los Angeles Angels third baseman. Just really grateful for Anthony to be joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Happy he was willing to share his story of sports and faith. You don't see a lot of things out there about Anthony Rendon's faith. You just don't find a lot out there. So it was really neat to have him share his journey with us and his story with us here at Sports Spectrum. He'll be in a pretty potent lineup when you add Mike Trout and Albert Pujols and now Anthony Rendon into a really good offensive lineup with the Angels. They're going to be a team to watch for in the American League. The question will be their pitching, and we'll see if they can make a dent in the American League in 2020. Many thanks to Anthony Rendon for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. And many thanks to you as well for listening. We love you guys. We're so glad that you found us, checked us out here on Sports Spectrum. If this is the first time you've ever heard Sports Spectrum before, thanks for joining us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of the podcast. We've got a bunch of them out there, over 450 episodes of Sports Spectrum. You can click that subscribe button. You can go back and listen to all of our podcasts. They go back now 3 years, and a great way to catch up and hear these stories of sports and faith. People that love sports, people that play sports, people that work in sports, and people that love Jesus. Subscribe now to the Sports Spectrum podcast. You can also go to our website. That's the home base for all of our content, sportsspectrum.com, sportsspectrum.com, and check out all of the content there. And then give us a follow on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and hit us up over there. Many thanks to our newest sponsors, IJM, International Justice Mission. Check out the great work they're doing to end slavery. Go to IJM.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time here on Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.